meeting. I'm sorry that we've taken this adjournment period, but there's been quite a lot of work going on in the background to seek to tidy up some of the resolutions, and it is a very difficult area. I mean, obviously, this is an area that I know very well because I represented it, obviously, as an MP for a number of years. And, you know, the stresses and strains on this community have been enormous, and it is the most beautiful area, and the existence of you know, what was red zoned back in the day, you know, and we do need a better name for it in this part of the world. It did create an enormous amenity, but the earthquake did incredible damage as well. And I think this paper and the resolutions we've been working on give us an opportunity to address some of the earthquake legacy edge issues, and but at the same time to look to the future and about what that creates by way of possibility for what is the most beautiful area of Christchurch, or one of the most beautiful areas of Christchurch. I'm a little bit biased in that regard. So I just kind of want to acknowledge that in working through all of these issues, we have sought to balance a number of issues. So I think probably the easiest place to start, because the resolutions are still being written up, and I'm aware of the fact that councillors haven't got anything in front of them yet, and that you're looking at the beautiful city coat of arms instead of a resolution. So we'll come to that. But look, the first two recommendations in relation to the continuous walkway, cycleway, and the South New Brighton north of Bridge Street, neither of those recommendations have been the subject of any change. So I think that if we could just look at the area-wide resolution, which is request staff to develop a continuous walkway, cycleway immediately adjacent to the estuary edge where appropriate, including renewal of the existing estuary walkway from Evans Ave to Ebbtide Street in South New Brighton, and from Ebbtide Street through the red zone to the south end of Southshore. The track improvement component of the work will be funded by $150,000 of the Regeneration Initiative's capital funding in 2019-20, and notes that funding for any proposed bund track for Southshore will be sought as part of the 2020-21 annual plan process. And then the South New Brighton north of Bridge Street, requesting staff to undertake a stop-back condition assessment and an update of previous investigations, etc. So those two recommendations stay the same. So has anyone got any questions on the first two ones? Yanni?
Just very simply explain a response to the deputation that we had in regards to the South Brighton Residents Association around the GHD report, the work that recommended get done and what's been done, because I'm really confused. We're asking for more information on something that, as I understand it, we have a lot of information on. Yep. And we've done work on. So I think it would be really, really good if staff could just really clearly explain what work has been done north of Bridge Street, what the GHD report said, and what we've done or what we're planning to do.
Tēnā koutou. Thank you very much for having me here today to speak specifically, I suppose, to this question that's come into the South Brighton Residents Association. In 2016, Council resolved to progress a project strengthening the Avon Stop Bank network, and the objective of that was to increase the durability of the stop banks and help manage the potential risks associated with failure of those stop banks. that were evaluated in a GHD risk assessment report, which is presumably part of the South Brighton Residents Association concern. And that work has, in the area of South New Brighton, now been complete. So after 2016, there was a detailed design undertaken by GHD to top up the stop banks, put rock revetment in places, widen the stop bank where required, replace some sandbags that were failing with other materials and the like. And that design culminated in a report in December 2018 that was, I understand, referenced during the deputation. So there was a logical sequence of a risk assessment undertaken by GHD, followed by design undertaken by GHD, followed by some construction works that have now been enacted to address the risks that were identified. Now, there were some risks in that risk assessment that have not been addressed, and that is primarily associated with groundwater control or seepage beneath the stop banks, which appears to be of concern. Now, that is the case of across the stop banking network, is that the materials beneath the stop banks permit passage of groundwater. Now, we have had GHD out on a number of occasions during large tidal events to inspect that seepage and report back to council about the risks associated with that. And they have not identified at this stage significant works in South New Brighton area that need to be undertaken to address any seepage issues. Essentially, where seepage can create concern is when fine material is carried with the groundwater that flows beneath the stop bank and can start to take soils away. And then the stop bank, the foundation of the stop bank is compromised. But there hasn't been evidence collected to date of that occurring. Now, it is obviously a significant alteration to the stop banking network if that type of control were to be required, and that's, you know, subject to much further investigation. So the nature of the works, particularly, just to summarise, in the South New Brighton area that were recommended were topping up the stop bank to the correct design height, which has been enacted, placing some additional rock revetment work at the end of Kibblewhite Street, which has now been enacted and is ongoing maintenance and observation required, and essentially, topsoiling, grassing and resurfacing the stop banks. So my understanding is that work's now been complete.
All the work's been complete. Why do we have the number 2 recommendation to do more investigation?
So the risk assessment was originally undertaken back in 2016 based upon the understanding of estuarine water levels at that point in time. And as has been reported, our understanding of those water levels has changed with the recent high extreme estuary water level events. So we had July 2017 and February 18 were both extreme water levels. And when you add those into the statistics, it changes the council's understanding of what an extreme event looks like. So the proposed recommendation is associated with looking back again at that original risk assessment, essentially validating it still holds or not, based upon our new understanding of estuarine water levels that has only been developed after the construction works and the works that were approved by council back in 2016. So there's a logical sequence of events here, and there's some more work required, and that's what's proposed in this report.
Just some two final clarification questions. The stop banks, do they have they got a seismic loading so that they will be in an earthquake, addressing things like lateral spread or risk of failure in an earthquake? Are they weighted in terms of seismic risk? And the second final question for clarification is, has there been any is there going to be assessment as part of that new work around the ISO 31000 2009 standard?
In response to your first question about the earthquake resilience of the stop banks, the short answer is no. The stop banks have not been designed to, the foundations for the stop banks has not been designed to mitigate the risks of lateral spread or settlement. Again, that would be a much larger project and would require further investigation and design and would need to be supported by subsequent decisions by council. So, and that wasn't recommended in 2016 associated with the original council decision. In response to the ANCOLD risk assessment work, maybe Peter, you're best to...
Okay, thank you. ISO 31000 is a risk management standard. It simply sets out the way that you carry out a risk assessment. It doesn't set any guidelines or figures or thresholds for life safety. The ANCOLD standard is to do with dams, but any structure which contains water, whether it's a dam or a coastal, like a stop bank or a seawall or anything like that, that does the same. It's as applicable to small structures as it is to large dams.
Sorry, the question was, the new assessment that we do, will that be based on the ISO 31000 standard?
We would follow the 31000 process where you identify what the context is, you look at what the risks are, and you evaluate the options that you can then for treating the risk. Yes.
Right. Okay.
Good. Are there any other questions on those two items? Pauline?
Furthering on from Tom's comments there, saying that to date there's been no identified seepage under the ground on the inside estuary edge.
Sorry, there has been seepage that has been observed, but that's the concern about a consequential failure in the stop bank network is not there. So we've had the engineers review those seepage events, go out on site and observe the seepage as it's occurred.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been a high level of risk associated with that occurring.
Significant seepage.
Correct.
Yep.
So yes, seepage is occurring. It doesn't appear to be migrating the fines with it, which would cause the potential failure of stop banks.
Right. So my question is, how would that data change should we see another event like, you know, a low pressure system, a storm, rain, inundation, flooding at the same time as we saw previously?
Well,
do you think there would be any change in that?
I think it's an issue that will need ongoing review and observation. I think that's an appropriate management response. It's challenging when the rains, seepage you observe typically when it's a dry day because you can see the water. If it's raining and you've got to have a lot of stormwater around, it makes it very challenging to isolate the origin of that water. So it's really the types of events that you might look for understanding seepages when you have an extreme tide without the rainfall event. But again, we certainly look to inspect the stop banks and undertake those sorts of assessments when those opportunities arise.
But aren't you able to do modelling to predict that sort of impact? I mean, if we're being asked to invest in structures along there, don't we need to know what the risk is, the likelihood? Because isn't that seepage what does undermine anything?
Well, I've tried to highlight the fact that there can be seepage which occurs and is not problematic, and that's the current understanding of the seepage that's occurring.
Yeah.
Of course, that can become problematic if the fines start migrating with the groundwater flows, and I'm sure there are risks. Well, there are geotechnical assessments that can be undertaken for seepage paths beneath stop banks, and that work could be undertaken, it's would need to consider the costs associated with doing so, and it would also require potentially a significant amount of geotechnical data to be collected to understand the soil profiles in enough detail to provide confidence that that technical assessment was suitably robust, and the approach to date has certainly been in observing the seepage when it occurs.
Sarah?
Thank you. Just following on from the seepage. So, the issue with the seepage seems to be an amenity and perception issue rather than a life safety risk one. Is that right? So there's concern from local residents about the amount of water sometimes coming in under the bund and flooding the road space outside of sort of storm, when the tides are high, and there's some concerns around that. But there's no risk to life or property due to it. Is that right?
That's our current understanding, is that from observational data that risk is not high.
How closely have we worked with residents on this rather than working with engineers? So have we had communication with the residents nearby, with the engineers there, sort of site meeting as it happens, so that we can explain and talk them through all of that to give them reassurance?
It's my view that this process that's now being proposed would help resolve some of those concerns with the community.
So during the times where we've had engineers on site looking at those high tide events, have we also talked to the residents about their experience of those events at the same time?
Not at that time. Yeah. Certainly council responds to questions as they come in to council through the various means, but there hasn't necessarily been a proactive walk over with the local residents.
I think that would probably be really useful if we had staff and the engineers and residents all being able to talk and share concerns and explanations at the same time. That's all.
Yeah, we can consider that going forward. So
yeah, I think that it would give those residents some reassurance of the process and their safety and. Yeah.
12 metres.
So, are there any other questions on 1 and 2?
Excessive erosion.
Yanni?
Sorry, just to clarify, because we just received the letter from the South New Brighton residents group, and they say
I
that.
thought you were already quoting from that. You've already asked 2 questions.
Yeah, no, I know, but I just want to be really clear that, I mean, they're saying that there's projects that we have that we haven't done, and you're saying there is no project that we've identified that we have not done.
We've followed through a process, a logical process from receiving a risk assessment to recommending works that were adopted by council through resolution, through detailed design and construction. It's my understanding that we have, resolved the immediate risks that were presented in that report. On the items, the exception is the groundwater that we've spoken about, and
right.
As I said, there's ongoing, would need to be a significant capital investment to address groundwater seepage beneath stop banks. It's no small task.
Okay.
Sure.
So I wonder why when you've taken out one used to be appropriate, because there may be, I wonder, are there any areas around the area that's immediately adjacent to the eastern edge that might not be appropriate to have a track or cycleway due to wildlife or any other issues that someone like the Ihutai Trust might bring up? And would we be tying ourselves into doing that if we resolve this? Is that wording?
Yeah, that was really to allow some flexibility for areas in which inundation may continually reoccur.
Yeah. So
another option might be to raise the pathway in those spaces.
So I would prefer to see those words where appropriate reinserted there, quite frankly, because I think we need them. So Sam, could you type that in, please? No, I can't ask you to do that.
Good try.
And would that also, while I've got a minute, would that also involve resource consenting for that pathway?
No, we don't believe so.
No?
I don't think so.
There might be an earthworks consent
Even
if
though,
you had to fill.
is this an environmentally sensitive area?
If there was any substantial earthworks, there may be the need for a consent, and there could be in places if it was close to where there had been erosion occurring.
What about habitat?
There could be a wildlife permit needed if you...
Yeah, I can't comment on that. Yeah.
So it may require
It could,
consent.
it could.
So I'm just asking, oh, she's still got
Things
that.
we,
Look,
things we
we had
need
a
to consider.
conversation before. The words "where appropriate" don't add anything.
I think they do, because the thing is that
Well,
it
we
may
checked
not be
with staff, and
appropriate.
staff were quite happy to remove the words.
Well,
is that
that's
right?
not the response I've had.
Well, you've heard why we originally put them in, but we're comfortable with them being removed, as the Mayor has said, so...
Well, the thing
that's-
is that we have been told that there may be areas where it's not appropriate to build it immediately adjacent. Therefore, we could be tying ourselves into doing that with this resolution unless we put the words "where appropriate" in. So I do feel more comfortable with "where appropriate" be included.
Nitpicking.
I guess, I think it's a degree of semantics. I mean,
Yeah, I
we're not
know.
going to do something inappropriate. So,
But the thing is that if you're
I
raising
think
an
there's
expectation...
sufficient flexibility in the resolution. I mean, staff have assured me that they don't require the words "where appropriate" in there to act appropriately.
Well, why don't we remove the word "immediately" then? So we just say "adjacent to," and that can be open to interpretation as well. I just think there could be areas, and it's a particularly sensitive area around there, like not just with erosion,
No.
but with wildlife. There may be areas where you don't want it right up close, and we could be tying ourselves into doing that. So either take out "immediately" or remove, or put in.
I don't believe you're tying yourself into anything with respect, councillor. I think staff would undertake this resolution in an appropriate manner to the environment.
Yes, but are we raising expectation in the community? Should part of the path not be right at the edge? Because we said we were going to do it.
I think it's semantics, really.
Yeah, no, I think...
We've been discussing this for years, and to be arguing over
But-
two words is...
Yeah, we're not in debate at the moment, so I'm just asking for people. And I mean, you know, we have been working hard on trying to get some wording for the resolutions, and they're just needing a little bit more work on them. So that's why I focused people's attention on 1 and 2. So Pauline's perfectly entitled to raise this as an issue, and I mean, the point that I've made is that it is an issue we've raised with staff. They're confident that we can remove that and that they are able to work appropriately in that environment. So, yeah. Sarah?
My concern over it would be that while staff are comfortable that they can work on it in an appropriate manner, it may lead to comment from the community if it isn't immediately adjacent to it, that things aren't being done as per the resolution. That was, yeah.
Look, I'd be comfortable if you remove the word "immediately"
Yeah. So it's adjacent to.
adjacent to.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So remove the word "immediately."
Have all got that on their email, the new resolutions?
Oh, right. So the resolutions have been emailed to staff, to councillors, so that we can run through some others. Do you want to scroll through the whole lot?
It's just that we've emailed it, so you can scroll through the whole lot rather than we can't fit it all on one page.
Okay.
Up on the screen.
Before you move off to, can we just, the staff said that they will use that ISO 39,000 or 31,000
The standard risk assessment tool.
Yeah, can we just add that in so it's clear?
It actually says that, well, the Stockbank condition assessment is not in accordance with the ISO. It's the life safety, well, it's the risk assessment. I don't think it's necessary to refer to the particular standard that you use.
It's a well-established and well-accepted,
Yeah.
and we wouldn't be doing our job well if we didn't use that as the basis for our assessment.
But, well, that's group, the deputations raised it, the staff have no issue with it, they will use it. I just think it would be good to put it in the resolution so that it's reflected.
Well, I don't want it as a resolution, I just want it to be noted then. So if we add in a note that, which is it, is it the risk assessment or is it the, which one is, which is the particular risk that is undertaken through that modelling?
ISO 31,000 is a risk management standard. It simply sets out the process by which you assess the risk. It doesn't talk about, like we have on the Port Hills, it doesn't give figures around what is acceptable life safety or anything like that. It's simply a process that we follow.
I'm afraid the letter writer doesn't understand the process. So we're just going to note that the process for assessing risk will be undertaken in accordance with ISO, which particular number is the ISO, International Standards Organisation, 31,000? 31,000. No comma, is it? It's
ISO before 31,000.
with ISO 31,000. Is that right? ISO
31,000, that is correct.
Yeah.
And the date is not 2009 as quoted by the writer, it's 2018. There's an updated version.
Yeah, ISO, and then in brackets 2018. All right, cool. Thank you. All right, so well, I'll move the block of resolutions, but we'll come back to questions on those. And do I have a seconder for that? David East. Right. So now we'll come down into number 3. It's probably easier if we ask questions on the in sections, isn't it? So number 3 is South New Brighton, south of Bridge Street, and this is an area which includes the estuary edge, Bridge Street to the jetty area, where there are current salt marsh. It implements engineered setback bunds giving protection to the South New Brighton School and Seafield Place. And then for the estuary edge yacht club to the boardwalk, implement a restoration of the edge as per earthquake legacy edge repairs using Reno mattresses and Gabion baskets as previously existed pre-earthquake. And then for the sake of completeness, request staff to report on any additional flood protection measures required for the area. Well, it's actually any flood protection measures required for the area. Jane, is that right? It's not additional, it's flood protection measures. So, and that's to confirm that there's a difference between restoration of the erosion protection measures and the flood protection measures. So we take out the word additional. Yeah. And resolve works will be funded by $750,000 of the Regeneration Initiative's capital funding in 2019-20, with any shortfall to be reported back to council as a matter of urgency. So that will be reported back to the next council. So can we just focus on that one, and has anyone got any questions on the South New Brighton, south of Bridge Street sections of the report? Sarah, Phil, Dion, Pauline.
Thank you very much. The section from Yacht Club to the Boardwalk, the current Reno mattresses and Gabion baskets are in pretty poor condition, I think. Do we need would this need consent, this work, and do we think we would get it?
Yes, there's a range of conditions of the Reno mattresses and the Gabion baskets along that section.
Yeah.
Some are in relatively good condition, some have broken down completely. Yes, we understand that we would need consents to do the work there, although there is their existing structure that we would need consents.
Yeah.
And we can't comment on whether we would get those or not.
Okay. And the Reno mattresses and Gabion baskets, are they currently in poor condition because they've been there for a long time and they've just kind of worn out, or is it due to the earthquake, or is it a mix?
Again, there is a combination of what our condition assessment has shown us. At the time of the earthquakes, they were at pretty much the end of their life, which is about 30 odd years.
Right.
So they had started to fail at that stage through corrosion of the wire mesh, and that was evident. Where there was liquefaction and lateral spreading during the earthquakes, they have failed in that they have moved sideways or laterally into the estuary.
Okay. And if we were looking at, so if the life is around 30 years of the baskets and things. So if we installed new ones, they'd last around 30 years.
Yeah.
And is there another method that would give longer term erosion protection for the area than the Gabion baskets and Reno mattresses?
Without knowing what the standard of wire mesh that was used for those existing ones, there is likely to be better quality mesh baskets available now, but generally the lifespan of those in that environment is quite short, so it would only be that 30-year period. You will have observed driving around seeing Gabion baskets on roadside cuttings as well. They would last considerably longer because they're not in a marine environment like these ones are.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt too? Because I think in answer to a question that you asked, Sarah, if you look at the further down the recommendations, there's a catch-all one which says that, and item number 8, it says, notes that the implementation of some of these actions is subject to obtaining necessary resource consents, and request staff to ensure that the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act options are considered to expedite the process.
Right.
So, so they're always going to have at the front of their mind, is this a regeneration plan or a Section 71 that could get us over the line a lot quicker than the consenting process?
Yeah. Thank you. And just with number 4 there, request staff to report on any additional flood protection measures. I mean, that's incredibly broad and doesn't have the earthquake legacy kind of stuff tagged to it. I mean, is this something that's looking at flood measures over time, looking at sea level rise, or is this just one that's strictly for that back to pre-quake flood level expectations? Because otherwise it's an enormous piece of work that could be, let's protect the whole area forever.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just coming up to speed with the resolution because I wasn't a party to the conversation that was held earlier. It's important to understand that the Gabion baskets and the Reno mattresses are purely there for erosion protection.
Right. Yeah.
They do nothing other than that, and they are built and placed to a particular level to support the ground behind them or to stop it eroding.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just making sure on the floods work that whether we're just looking at getting back to pre-quake flood levels or all flood levels.
You are correct.
Because the phrasing that's there currently says any flood, not just pre-quake kind of level of flood protection.
You are correct that the intent of that was to address earthquake legacy.
Could we maybe just add a couple of words that
So we're
refer
just
to
trying to
earthquake
capture
legacy?
the flood aspect as well as the erosion.
No, absolutely. I completely. We do need to do the flood aspect. I just wanted to make sure that we're not going beyond the scope of the earthquake legacy repairs, which is the target of the report.
Yeah, but that's why we've asked staff to report on any flood protection measures required for the area.
My concern was just the word any, because that could refer to more than just the earthquake legacy back to the flood protection previously and could go back into that much broader sea level rise flood protection.
I guess we were
that
talking
we were
within
trying
the
to,
context of this report.
yeah,
Yeah.
or in the context of earthquake legacy, or
Or request staff to report separately on flood protection measures that may be required for the area.
again, that could be
Yeah.
flood protection for sea level rise. It could be a whole range of things. We were just looking at the earthquake legacy.
Just put in the context of this report.
My understanding of the discussions we had earlier was to create a separate discussion
Yeah.
on the need for and placing of bunding
Yeah,
after the erosion protection was done.
not for erosion
Not for
protection, for
erosion.
flood
For
protection.
flood protection.
Yeah, flood protection.
Yeah.
after-
Yeah, to get us back to that pre-quake
Yeah,
level of flood protection.
or,
I'm-
or,
yeah.
or potentially more
I
protection.
mean, we have that other piece of work going on at the same time on the moor,
Yes, but
and I just,
But-
yeah.
you know, it's a there is a sense of an obligation to build back better in a post-disaster environment.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
you know, I think we should look at, you know, I mean, there are significant assets in this area.
that need
and-
protection, absolutely.
Yeah, but it was also to make it clear that what we're talking about here is not flood protection; it's erosion protection.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I'm just wondering with number 4 whether that's the other
But we've
piece of
got,
work.
in the
The
context
other
of
piece
this
of work.
report's been added. Right, Phil.
Thank you. There's obviously the different parts of the report, and I'm just wondering if you could remind me, just in terms of this section, from the jetty to for the yacht club to the boardwalk. Just could you remind me just what distance that is that covers, that edge covers, or approximately or roughly?
300 metres.
I think it's slightly longer than that.
There's
That would be-
300 metres of badly damaged, and the whole area is 600. So you've
600,
That's
yeah.
the
You've
figure.
got a
600,
mixture of some
Double.
that's
It's
in
six-
reasonable
it's 600.
condition.
It's about
So
650.
my
300.
question really too, though, is, and although currently those Reno mattresses and gabion baskets are there, and in effect they've decayed, I'm just wondering how much of that whole section actually will respond to what sounds like it would be another hard edge. In terms of
Sorry, could
erosion
you just
protection.
restate that?
I'm just wondering, this is quite a long stretch of the edge, so, and some of it currently has the gabion baskets. They haven't been entirely successful by the look of it. But anyway,
Some of it's been repaired already.
Yes, indeed. So my question is, how well would you consider that a hard edge like this will really work to prevent erosion of this edge?
Gabion baskets are an effective, low-cost method of protecting things like estuary edges or riverbanks where the energy it's relatively low energy environment.
So given that the predictions will be that we get a higher energy environment and storm surge, I'm wondering how effective all this work is going to be, and I wonder if you could comment on that. In effect, like the gabion baskets, as a form, I guess, of a hard edge.
If they're appropriately designed and the right size baskets and the right weight of infill material is used in the baskets, then they would be successful. Only to the point, though, that the water level or the energy that's dissipated is dissipated against those gabion baskets and doesn't flow over the top of them.
Thank you. So in effect, this method, a downside of this method, is that with higher sea level and storm surge, in fact, it may not be successful behind them.
But we're not addressing.
But that's what I...
The report addresses earthquake repairs.
Yeah.
Dion.
Just wanted a question around the financial bit on your resolution, the new resolution 5.
Yep.
And it doesn't make reference to the sum in the previous resolution in 3A, which was 1.8 to 2.35 million, and we've seemed to have lost that number. I just wanted to understand why.
Because fundamentally the resolution has changed, and
So there is that remaining outstanding, I don't know.
It's just gone to report back to council with any shortfall as a matter of urgency rather than the previous resolution, which actually had a sum stipulated to come back to the annual plan. And I just wanted to know what was the reasoning behind that.
So that's
I think, well, I mean, because I've been working on this, the answer to that question
It's in
is
6C as well.
is that
The original.
so because we were concerned that the 750k may not be sufficient for the funding, so it's come through here, and the the allocation of additional, because for this part of the project, see that original resolution related to a much bigger program of works, and so now with the narrower focus of the works, we think that it probably isn't a lot more than the 750, but we won't know the amount. But we wanted to indicate that it has to come back to council for a decision, and we want to complete the work, whether the funding as urgently as possible. But the question is whether the funding will be required in this financial year or the next financial year, because sometimes when you do projects, the level of when the payment is made slips out by a financial year, but the work still gets done within the year before. So it needs to come back to the next council for that final sign off on the additional funding. But this gets the project underway.
I think originally we were talking about the cost of bunding work in the project as well.
It's a much bigger program.
And
different context.
Okay.
Tim Sinters and I had obtained an original quote of around 535,000 for the Gabion work, so we think the 750 should cover it.
Right.
And staff had suggested that maybe up to $1 million may be required, but I'm reasonably optimistic that the budget that we've got there will cover that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wasn't very happy
Yeah, no,
with
it's a good question. That was a good
having
question.
a $1.5 to $2.5 million
but
surprise in a few weeks.
It's a reduced program of work, so you're right to question that. Pauline and Mike?
Yeah, thank you. My question's around 3A, which basically reads, proceed with engineered setback bunds to give protection to South New Brighton School and Seafield Place. Do we have any engineered solutions that will do that? Or would that be better to read investigate engineered solutions?
That's the proposal that relates to the setback bund.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It is an engineered setback bund.
And that will provide protection to the school.
Correct.
and
Yes.
Seafield Place.
yes.
Yep. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yep. Mike?
Thank you. Just a question. Obviously, one of the biggest changes is it limits the methods that can be used, and in the that's 3B, it obviously states that it's Reno mattresses and Gabion baskets. Is there actually better methods that could be used?
Any better methods would be considerably more expensive. So yes, there are more permanent structures that could be built. But difficult in that environment given the foundation conditions in particular along the estuary edge.
Does it need to be hard structures though? Is there better soft?
There would be, you could achieve the same outcome, but it would involve a greater width of the estuary edge to achieve that same outcome.
So are we limiting ourselves by actually just pinpointing these two methods when actually there could be better environmental outcomes and protection as well?
It's always a tough choice between using soft and hard engineering methods, and it depends very much on the availability of space to do that. Where hard engineering structures have been used in the past, there's an expectation that you would replace them with a similar sort of structure, but there is room there is ground, there is space where you could allow a more naturalised edge.
All right, so we'll move on to Southshore. Can we lift up number 6, please? This one asks for investigations into immediate and longer term erosion options in Southshore. And it seeks that a collaborative group to be established, which includes a technical expert nominated by the Southshore community to investigate the immediate earthquake edge issues for the estuary edge repair and protection, including the development of a suitable erosion mitigation plan with costings, including options for the formerly privately owned edge structures and the position of the 11.4 metre bund. And that's not the bund at 11.4. That's at. Is it the?
Yeah.
It is at 11.4.
The crest of it.
That sorry.
The crest of
the crest
bund.
of it. Yeah. Sorry. And then notes the above. Southshore Erosion Mitigation Plan will be presented in the first instance to the Southshore Residents Association and the Coastal Burwood Community Board for comment before presentation to Council in early 2020, and recommend that funding be made available for implementation of the Estuary Edge Legacy repair in 2020 and urgently prioritised. So are there any questions for staff on these recommendations? Glenn?
Thank you. Just 6A, is it quite deliberate to leave a collaborative group open without making explicit what the members of that group would be?
I've said that council as governance are not going to choose which engineering company that the council chooses to engage.
Yes, when
and the community want very much to involve their own technical expert. They want them embedded in the process, and I actually think that's a much better way of operating anyway. When the technical experts get together with the technical experts at council, and that the sort of the three essentially work very collaboratively with each other. Putting in place a report back mechanism through the Residents Association and the Community Board, I think is a very positive way to engage the process, and I think people have had enough of technical advisory groups or advisory groups, community advisory groups, and they would like to have a more formalised reporting and feedback loop so that they can engage in a much more direct way rather than just through an advisory group.
Okay, so it's not a group of stakeholders as such?
No. This is a technical collaborative group to get the technical work done to investigate the immediate issues for estuary edge repair and protection, and include the development of a suitable erosion mitigation plan.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions on that? Yep, Pauline, Sarah?
Around the 6C with the funding, so that's only pertaining to the estuary edge, so that's not around the... So we think there's enough funding for that would encompass the 1.3 regen money and possibly a smaller amount. Whereas you've got some options in the body of the report with the erosion thing might be 1 to 1.5 million and things like that. It's not about that, is it? We probably don't want to reference the money.
Yeah, we can only recommend to the incoming council, so we're not in a position to allocate funding ahead of the investigation being completed.
Good, okay,
so
that's
it's going to
fine.
have to come back to the next council.
Yeah, it's a decision to be had.
Sarah?
Thank you. I guess there's a question on these, the resolutions generally. There's one of the original staff recommendations was just a noting provision that council staff will report back to council in early 2020 on the proposed approach and timing of adaptation planning and coastal hazards plan changes. I know that we had plenty of feedback from the community through this process that while they are concerned about the earthquake legacy issues and want that addressed, there was also some significant anxiety in the community about that long-term process as well. And so I thought that adding that note back in would provide comfort on some of the timeframes for that work for the community who is feeling anxious about sea level rise and the future planning around that.
Sorry, that's the next section?
Sorry, but I thought it had disappeared, that noting provision.
It has disappeared out of the next section.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it
So
is the
do we want
generally,
to scroll up to the next section?
but it's not there at all, so I wasn't sure where to put it in which section.
But this is where it was. So it
Yeah.
was previously in here. So the final two recommendations, and actually there was another one which talked about
There was two, I think, yeah.
Manage
all
above
actions to have a mind for durable future proofing. So
That was Councillor East's, yeah.
so
But I'm not quite sure what it meant.
Yeah, it was the original 6 and 7, I think.
yes, I know, but we had another one here which was all actions to have a mind for durable future proofing. I think that the idea is that whenever items are being considered in this area, that the durability and the future proofing is in the mind. You know, so they're mindful of these things as they go through.
Yeah.
I think staff are always going to be mindful of that, but
I think that 6
no,
is
I
probably...
actually think it's really important that we don't. The last thing that I want to do is to have us again entering into a debate about the preliminary work around earthquake repairs and then the future work. So I'm happy in another report, and I'm even happy to sort of kick something off in my Merrill report,
Yeah, that would be
the
great.
last one for the term that kicks it off for the incoming council, to make sure that we've got that up front and centre in terms of the coastal hazards chapter. I think this community is concerned that they continue to be associated with sea level rise and climate change and all of those issues as if they are the only ones in the whole of the district that we cover. And of course we've got all of Banks Peninsula, we've got Sumner and Redcliffs and all of those to address as well. And there are a lot of communities who absolutely want to be engaged in
Absolutely.
that part of the
Yeah, yeah.
process.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
All right. So, Phil?
In terms of engaging the technical expert who's been nominated by the community group, have we got any idea of the costings of that, and where that would come from, or is that part of the overall funding that's referred to here?
I just think you are.
No, at this stage we don't. The one caution I have there is staff are required to follow well-established procurement processes, and there are a number of consultants in this field that can do the work and be involved. So we need to follow that procurement and be able to justify the decisions that we obviously make on the selection of people to do that work.
But not the community one.
Oh, not the community.
The
No.
community decides
Yes,
themselves.
exactly right.
And just simply nominate a company
Yes.
for you to take on board.
Yep.
Yep.
So in effect, we wouldn't, as a council, wouldn't know the expertise and robustness, say, of that expertise. The council wouldn't be aware of that. They would just be nominated by the community.
We do have an understanding of the expertise and experience, and if you're referring to the OSOL report and Gary Tier in particular, it's important to note that Gary is a marine engineer and his company specialises in marine engineering as opposed to more coastal process and related work. So we would need to be careful that we had a good balance on that group of experts.
So that's acknowledged. Thank you.
Good. All right. Mike?
Just one last question. Obviously, there's been quite a few changes from the original staff's recommendations.
Correct.
Is there any of these new recommendations that actually cause you concern?
We don't believe so, no.
Sorry, we've just got a little technical issue here just in terms of the numbering of resolutions, but can we sort that out when we get the debate going? So, yeah, so anyway, so the resolution has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Dion.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's good to see something that will give some certainty to some things that are going to happen in this area. It has been left for quite some time. There's been a myriad of planning and all sorts of things that are going on in that space, and there needs to be more planning, but not just for here, but for the entire coastal area. I acknowledge the community that's been fighting for this for quite some time as well, and hopefully they can continue to be engaged and see some good results for their communities. And the other thing around the Bridge Street North work, just want to reiterate that, make sure that that gets done in a timely manner, because that community is on edge and anxious, and we need to give some certainty to those people. But thanks for the work that you've done, and especially to the community who have been involved.
Yanni and Glenn.
Yeah, I too just want to acknowledge the work that's been done on this. I think for those of us who have gone and visited it, it's really obvious we have an amazing asset for our city that is being allowed to erode, and it's been a real tragedy. So I totally support getting work done to try and protect the area as much as possible, to enable future generations to enjoy the recreational opportunities, and also to give some confidence to that local community that we are doing what we can to slow down any impacts that are currently happening. It is quite soul-destroying to walk through the area and see the trees that are being removed because of the saltwater intrusion, and just to see the condition that that's been left in, I think is a real shame. So I welcome this opportunity. This is a fantastic recreational area. It's a fantastic community, and it deserves our support. So I'm happy to support the resolutions that have been put. I would note that I still have serious concerns about north of Bridge Street, and I hope that this process going forward can try and address some of those. It seems to me inherently flawed, the way in which this whole area has been allowed to be left lower than what it would appear is the level of water. And I just think it just, as I've walked through that area, it seems pretty heartbreaking that people are left in that condition. So if we can do more work around that and give some greater confidence around the stop banks and the life safety risk of flooding, then I think that would be a positive.
Glenn.
Thank you. These things aren't easy, and it takes a lot of goodwill and ownership to try and work them through. My observations are, as a member of the local Coastal Burwood Community Board, is that I think in many ways to date best endeavours have been undertaken by various parties concerned to try and land in one place. So CCRU, I think, have displayed a great degree of goodwill. I've been in constant communication with the Ihutai Trust, and in that regard, because you will be curious, and it has attracted some attention on 3B, theoretically it might be better ecologically to be set back, but I've asked about further Ramsar status, and that is one objective which we're pursuing. That's the wetlands of international significance. If we proceeded with 3B, that wouldn't compromise that. So that's good to know in their view. Notwithstanding, we will have further processes with resource consent, etc. Today is a chance to provide a green light for a community which is effectively living in orange light status, and no one wants to live in uncertainty. So I think we have to try and find a way that's not either or. The same community which wants their homes protected also cherishes and values the estuary, and we can see that by the turnout to welcome and farewell the Godwits. So please, let's not get drawn into it's either one or the other. They all want both. So I'm pleased that we're pursuing these. These have been really hard to work through, but 3B, while not ideal for the Estuary Trust, my observation is that they can go with that.
Phil?
I was certainly really appreciative of the work the residents have done, and they've been incredibly patient, and it's been very difficult. But also the staff have also done a huge amount of work. And when I look at the report, and when I hear the comments of the staff today, the part that still concerns me is the area in section 2, South New Brighton, north of Bridge Street. Sorry, south of Bridge Street, where in fact, from the staff comments, there's a large area of coastline. Now, if we confirm this today, will all be hard edged. The original report substantiates the value in having a range of hard and soft edges, and to me that was the staff view and the staff recommendation earlier on. I just think that and the staff have also explained today how in fact, yep, this will prevent erosion, and it seems to me though what they meant is in the short term, because clearly with greater storm surge the hard edges do not always work. Currently they don't work. It's not just because they've decayed. So I'm really disappointed that as a council we've arrived at a point where in fact environmentally we are, in my view, from what I've heard, we are not making the best decision, and I will not be able to support 3.
I'll go with Sarah. I'll come back to you, David. Yeah.
Thanks. I think just in response to that, I think that in the area that's just been talked about, I think that reinstating what was already there is not a huge environmental loss. I think plantings may provide a longer term solution, but in 25 years or 20 years, we're going to be looking at that area again, and I would think that plantings will likely be the only option at that point. However, if you notice through in 6A, it looks at the rest of the estuary edge down there and does talk about a range of hard and soft options and about work to be done to find the best option. Nothing that we're doing today puts a hard edge in a new place with environmental degradation. Thanks.
David?
Thank you. Look, this whole process has consumed my time and energy for a long, long time, and it's probably responsible for my present condition. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge my 2 colleagues sitting in the back, Tim Sinters and Kim Money, who, along with me, have fought tirelessly for many years now to actually get to where we are hopefully getting to today. They are both retiring from council at the end of this term, but I certainly would like to just give my personal acknowledgement in public for the huge amount of effort that they have put into this project as well. I need to probably calm myself a little, and I'll plagiarise something that I heard the Mayor say last week. I'm not angry. I'm not angry. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed.
That was my Brownlee comment.
So I'm disappointed that my community has had to endure somewhere around 8 years of endless consultation, endless talk, numerous reports, numerous promises of action, but in the end, no tangible decision-making or outcome on the repair of earthquake damage to the estuary edge of South New Brighton and Southshore until now. I'd like to also acknowledge staff for the work that they've done on this project. Jane, Katie, David, you were challenged with coming up with something in 8 weeks. It has been a difficult time for you, and the timeline that was given to get to where we are now has been pretty demanding. So I acknowledge the intense pressure that staff have been put under to get to where we are. There seemed to be a reluctance to embrace any sort of movement forward for the issues we've been attempting to resolve. Consequently, large tracts of land have been eroded, trees have died, and recreation assets have been compromised. Entrenched ideas and outcomes have been promoted, and it would seem that predetermined outcomes were often the norm. A paranoia had existed that we can't do this sort of repair because it might compromise adaptation planning and the development of the coastal hazards chapter of the district plan. The two can be and have been easily separated, and it seems that we can now go forward with that. The amendment that we have before you today was initially driven and written by the community, and today I came here with the notion that I was going to put the community resolution as it stood and see how we went and move forward from that. But I have to acknowledge that I think today we have managed to workshop the community resolution, staff resolution, and some other expertise to come to the resolutions that we have before us today. Essentially, the amendment is primarily concerned with the earthquake legacy damage to the estuary edge north and south of Bridge Street and South New Brighton. The Hutai Trust had previously given support for the restoration between the jetty and the boardwalk, and I note Councillor Livingston's comments, and I think going forward it will be good to embrace the Hutai Trust in some of the further discussions as we move on. Councillor Clearwater talked about an increasing amount of hard edge around the estuary. With the shift of the estuary, the Avon River mouth some distance upstream to Admiral's Way, the natural edge of the estuary has expanded significantly. The salt marsh that exists between Bridge Street and the jetty, and again at Jellicoe Marsh, remains untouched. And the natural edge of the estuary has expanded somewhat significantly. What we are in effect talking about in terms of repair in South Brighton is 300 metres of a 600 metre strip. 300 metres is badly damaged, 300 is in reasonable condition or needs minimal repair. Then we talk about Southshore, an area of probably somewhere around 1K. All the community want is equitable treatment with other parts of the estuary edge and to get on with it. Adaptive planning and the coastal hazards chapter can reinforce there is a future for the area. If sea level rises to predicted levels in 100 years, it's not just this area that will have issues, so will large tracts of the city, right up to Lancaster Park. Don't pick on us.
David.
Adaptive management
David,
is a strategy that will apply to Christchurch City, but in the next 30 to 50 years, I'm almost finished, it appears we can adapt quite readily. The former Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, Dr. Jan Wright, is on record as saying we have plenty of time to adapt. You heard Dr. John Cook talk of the psychosocial stress of a large number of people in his practice a few weeks ago and the huge effect it has on our community. Please give this resolution your support and let the people of this area have the ability to regain confidence in the City Council and get on with their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil.
Can you put 3B separately, please?
I'm sorry, I wish to speak, and yes, so I'll just I'll close off the debate. First of all, I want to acknowledge three groups: our own staff, the residents of these areas, and the community board. And I want to echo David East's words in acknowledging both Kim Money and Tim Sinters. They have been extraordinary community leaders at the toughest time that anyone can be a leader in a community. devastated, as we all were, by the earthquakes in 2010, 2011, there were particular challenges faced in the eastern suburbs that I don't think anyone will really fully appreciate unless they were there on the ground at the time and throughout. And I know that my role has changed since then, but my heart has never moved from where it was on the day of the 4th of September 2010, which is an anniversary we recognised very soon, when I was awoken at 4:35 in my bed in Bexley, and I was one of the lucky ones. Our red zoning announcement came on the 23rd of June 2011, just after 1:30 p.m. The Minister did let the local MPs know 5 minutes before a great big public announcement was made, so I guess I had advance warning for myself. But from that moment onwards, even though I was devastated by the loss that it represented, I had certainty. I knew that I was leaving, and I could start mentally to prepare for the leaving straight away. People in Southshore did not find out they were red zoned until, although they knew they could be, until Friday the 18th of May 2012. That is an extraordinary period of time for people to live with absolute uncertainty. And this is what it was like on the day. 198 were zoned red and 203 were zoned green. And I'll tell you, there were people on both sides of that colour scheme who wanted to be on the other. There were people who were green zoned who wanted to be red zoned. There were people who were red zoned that wanted to stay, were desperate to stay, and would have stayed if they felt that they had the choice to remain. So I just want to acknowledge the past, the history that we've been through. This is an amazing environment, and I think, Dion, you were the one that talked about, for those that have been out there and looked at that incredible place, it is an extraordinary asset, the way that it now... Was it you, Yanni? Oh, sorry. I'm always getting the two of them confused, but I'm going to run out of time. What I want to say is to agree with both of you that this is an extraordinary place, and it is an extraordinary place for both people from the area, but it's also an extraordinary asset for the city as a whole. What we're dealing with here are some of the earthquake legacy issues. We will deal with the bigger issues in the next phase of work. But I just want to say that these are challenging issues, and this is why I acknowledge staff as well as the community board and the residents. Trust is required. Trust is required for the give and take that lies at the heart of the getting to yes. Sometimes we all agree on the objective, we just don't agree on how we get there. But getting to yes is an important part of the journey that we've been on and will be on in the future. And that does require give and take. Give and take can't be all give and it can't be all take. It has to be both. And that means that we have to re-establish trust. And I think that is what today's resolutions are all about. We all want the same thing, and that is for this environment to be all that it can be for the people who live there and for the people who visit there and enjoy the wonderful amenity that it offers the city. So on that note, I will put separately item 3. So I'll deal with 3 first. So I'll put item 3. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no.
No, except for, I'm happy to vote for 3A, but not B.
Okay, well, that was 3B. If you could just note that Phil Clearwater opposed 3B, and I'll put the balance. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. It's carried. Thank you very much. Well done.